recording. There we go. And today we are going to have quite much to go through as it's on our agenda to work on animation. And before we go, hands up or emojis or whatever you want to use, how many of you possibly did any or even work in animation or have animation, any kind of experience? All right, pretty nice number. And yes, of course, only one school usually is not, but also if someone is also in their free time or something and being interested um, to try out. Naturally, especially if you're maybe, I don't know, doing game jams or something, and then you get a chance to do different kind of animations, then it's always good to be, if nothing else, familiar with how certain things work, even if it's not necessarily something that might be sparking enough joy that you would consider doing it as a possibly even a career. It's funny that my daughter, from all the stuff, she actually got really into animation, and now in art high school, she is really going into this more traditional, which is fascinating, kind of like the paper animation. I never had that privilege to try actually, so I'm always fascinated to see what she's coming up with, and it's yeah. But anyway, today we are going to talk about animations and how things move and what does that besides the kind of like the practical aspects of the animation, also what does that do to your particular product development, character development, any kind of like generally the audio-visual storytelling, because movement is extremely important part of the stories we tell. And that can be, we will also discuss the sort of different focuses and camera modes as well, which have huge impact in it as well, especially for the storytelling perspective. Um, so this is just going to be basics of animation today. And I have so many materials to share for those who um, are interested to explore further, both theory and practice, in the sense that there are also free tools you can use to try things around, play around. And I will also, when I do live, like demonstration of some of the tools, I will also show you some of the ways how you can use some of these for animation, not just for art production. So let's dive in. So today we are, as said, focusing on what happens when things start to actually move on the screen, and what does that, how do we approach it from art direction or even from the product specification in general. So there is like, when it comes to animation, same like you will see soon also in VFX and even in tech art, um, because even that animation is not a new discipline compared to, for example, VFX. It is still, at least in games, like there is um, there are different approaches to do the either 2D or 3D, depends what you're doing, or the sort of combo of 2.5D or anything in between. Because again, we are mostly faking stuff, especially when we think about static camera that we have, usually from the scene. Doesn't matter now how you interact with the world, but still you are having usually framed world within the screen that you are interacting with. So consider that as this sort of camera composition that we will be also using today in some of these principles. And why kind of like with the failing in animation, this is really tricky, because there are, of course, these principles and rules that we follow, in a sense that what usually works decent enough, or at least could be reused in various places and ways, especially in games, because when we, for example, rig or make skeleton setting for either 2D or 3D, we do try to also reuse that rig to possibly some, let's say if you have a character, if it's a humanoid character, and then it has possibly, let's say, similar structure and size with some other character, but basically you can reuse rigs every now and then. I wouldn't recommend it, at least in the beginning, but they are, and then also you can even get ready models with rigs from wherever, from app stores, or like sorry, from the asset stores and so forth. So basically, it should work plug and go, but then there can happen some breakages here and there, and also that's why kind of like just figuring things out. So that's why even the things seem like, oh, this should work when you see it, because again, our brain is so good at detecting that something is not right. And you can't always put your finger on what that is, what that means, that it's something is not right. So figuring things out is so that's why like stand up, like don't worry, it's not actually like failure as such, but try again, try tweaking. Usually it's the tweaking part, and we will see that very soon. So um, before we go into the principles, because we will cover the basics of animation, which has 12 principles, the the things to consider, doesn't matter what you do, like literally doesn't matter what kind of animation you do, doesn't matter, is it not even interactive one, it can be traditional animation for, like just literally cartoon kind of thing. um, any moving object, any, so it doesn't matter, is it a object, let's say a ball, bouncing ball, or is it a character moving and so on, it always have to be intact, or the movement has to also reflect the size, shape, mass, and gravity rules of the world in which now this object is being present at. So basically, there are the rules that you set for the world, how things behave within that specific world, will determine also what kind of movement in a specific situation there might be. So basically, we are determining how the object behaves also without any movement. And that's kind of this static mode of the object. Now, in games, we usually don't have a static, as it's more in a, like you can have in the, let's say, animated movies, TV, so like in the shows, in cartoons, you can have a moment where there is literally no movement. So you have a static, let's say, character while other character might be talking or doing something. But we don't usually have that in games. Very often we have idle animations. Now, idle animations, the main reason for it is that we see that the character, and it's exaggerated, like, so basically this sort of like having even just standing and breathing is very exaggerated than what it would be that the character, especially let's say a human character, would just stand still and be. So the reason for that is making sure that you know that your character is ready to do action. Basically, it's not mistaken that the game froze, the bug, and so no, it's just like character is active. Like it's there is this sort of like it's ready for action, and it's going to be from that idle state moving into whatever other action it might be heading towards. But that all follows again um, the rules of the world and how things behave in it that you have set in the first place. So when we look at these, for example, characters on the sheet here next to each other. So just like when we were talking about shapes and colors, this is where shape language, I mentioned that already then, that shape language will also be big kind of rule, art direction rule of how the object will be even moving. Because now when we have specific kind of character that also represents specific kind of behavior, characteristics of the character and so on, based on the shapes and colors. And so basically then we need to match the movement that it would be believable that this character behaves that way. And then if it doesn't, behave in the way that it would be expected, then basically that means that something happened to this character. It's something out of the place, and therefore you're now figuring out what needs to be done, might be part of some quest and so forth. And we do that also in the way that size, shape, and mass And we'll see that also very soon in the throughout different slides, that how we treat the size, shape, and mass, especially for the sake of being believable. We have to, in many principles, there is this exaggeration, and there will be animated GIFs to show these sort of examples. But these are just examples. And again, just something to help you understand how certain movements and what we think about when we think about the movement overall, both as an environment as well as the object within that environment. But the reason why shape and size and mass need to be in correlation with the way how the world functions around, meaning what are the gravity rules, and mostly gravity rules, and then how other, basically, what that determines also what kind of, let's say, quality of object we are speaking about. So if we think about the ball, just basic rubber ball. Now, the ball could be, squishy, bouncy ball that you would, let's say, play in the, well, let's use football, for example, like football ball. So filled with air, it can have its, it has its density, it has its mass, but it's still the mass of it and the weight of it is not that heavy. But then if we have a bowling ball, that is going to, first of all, even if it bounces, it's not going to bounce like a regular ball. So basically, by determining its mass, it will behave differently, even if it does its own movement. And then there are balls that could be super light and kind of like more like a balloons that could be not just extra bouncy, but they will be more shaped. Like you can really see the change in shape as it hits the surface. So it would be more kind of like reflective to the forces that come against, unlike the bowling ball, for example. If we smack it into something, then basically it will most likely break through even the wall or so. Again, this is exaggeration, but just to give you this sort of like, so that is going to determine, like, our brain again will be expecting certain type of behavior from the type of objects that we are creating these rules for. And the move or the movements overall, they have this, usually they have the primary, secondary, and many others movements, and we will see how that also affects. So usually you have the main movement. For example, again, bouncing ball. So it's bouncing. That's its main movement. Or it can be that you are throwing a ball. So basically the act of throwing, and then the ball will be, so that mostly it will be the act of human or whoever is throwing. How does that movement go? And then the how the ball behaves after the act is being taking place. And then we have the things that follow through, for example, that you have the object. For example, here in the image, we have, for example, this one character who has a long coat, or there could be different kind of hats or hair. Like, how does hair behave as following the movement of the main object, which is some character, which is now doing some type of movement. So these primary, secondary, and so on movements, this is also what we will be going through today. And most of our static, so again, in the traditional animation, we use the static mode. In game animation, we use, or we treat idle animation as a static. So that's your starting point. Now, the static position, or the way of the, let's say, how something stands in its natural pose, whatever that is the one that serves for us also as a comparison, because we are comparing not just how from that position one turns into whichever movement, but it's also comparison for size, shape, and mass. So that's the one that we are comparing towards, that when the stuff happens to it, it's still believable that what is happening to it, again, whatever the action might be. And it doesn't matter what rules you apply in this world. So again, it can be more realistic, like Newtonian physics that we usually call in this sense, from kind of like something that it's very much what we are aware from the real world, sort of like what expectations there might be, some more realistic movement, even though all of this is obviously very much arbitrary. Nothing is really realistic in animations, because we also want to make sure that the brain understands what it sees and what kind of but again, creating something believable. And then is it more kind of literally kind of cartoon one, which means again breaking the rules of the real world. So for example, if you have a character that runs, and there is a cliff, and then suddenly runs over the cliff, but only when looks down, that's when the kind of like, oh, and then it starts falling. So basically observation after that, after observation of the situation, then something else happens. That's very common, this sort of that you're breaking the rules of the world, which is kind of like from the real world. So this is where what we use cartoon, or call it, at least we still call it cartoon rules. And then we have a speed of movement. Now, just like in music, we have, and just like what we saw about the composition, when you have empty parts in order of the composition, let's say empty sky, in order to really highlight where the focus point for the viewer would be. So same thing we do with movement, especially when we are very carefully designing the movement, and when what moves in which moment, also when certain actions start, continue, maybe merge, stop, where is the pause in between, and so on. So basically, just like in music, when you have notes and pauses, that becomes the whole experience. This is super, super important. And of course, something that it's faster movement, slower movement, and how these transitions happen, and how we control these, especially when it comes to the frames or whatever principle. But we will today at least touch upon frame animation as a basis, because that will help a lot. Same with which is applicable also to 3D. So these are the things to keep in mind when it comes to any type of movement, any kind of environment, any kind of object. So again, organic, inorganic, whatever. We will also show some ways how we highlight the quality of the object. Like again, the difference when something is organic and something is inorganic, like mechanic. We will also have some of these examples as well. So this is the basis upon which now we will explore all these principles. And hopefully after this will be clearer. And when you watch any kind of animation, including also animes or whatever else you watch in your spare time, pay attention. Because there will be some things that will be really fascinating next time when you watch something and they're like, oh, this is what they did here and there. Because now you will understand way better how, like, what is the thought behind designing this whole, the movement as a flow, and what kind of message the movement itself might be giving. Any thoughts or questions on that so far on this? Is this all clear? You can give either comment or of course just thumbs up or so, and then I know we can move on. All right, yeah, we'll also take silence for approval as well. Yes, attendance list I will post very soon. It's still early too, because there will be still people most likely joining, so I will be sharing attendance list very soon. Good. Let's move on then. Let's go to the principle number 1. So the basic principles, I said there will be 12. So the first one, and this is, by the way, all these principles, they usually work together, obviously, but this separation of certain principles will allow you to really focus on different features of the objects, depending what you're animating, and how these objects are also correlating with each other when it comes to action reaction, and their quality, and all the other shapes and everything else that can be. So that's why, like, even if some principles You will see later, they might even seem very similar, but they are actually quite different when it comes to what they refer to. And I will point that out as we go. But the first one, that literally every single object always have, is squash and stretch. That's literally everything. So basically, we are, as a shape, mass, and the way, the kind of the rules of the world and the force upon which something is, let's say, bouncing ball or shooting something or throwing something, based on the force also, that there is another effect that can be giving a big difference of what kind of amount of squash and stretch. So literally that means squash and stretch kind of thing, that would be as what happens to the object. So what we are manipulating with squash and stretch is the feeling of speed, of momentum, of weight, of mass, of how, again, the natural way of reacting or acting of the object would be in the environment that we give. So the amount of squash, like if something literally like a pancake squash kind of thing, the amount of squash or stretch, like this sort of like, how is this going to go? It's all about the mass. So we are giving basically information of what is the mass, and again, what is the force upon which something is being affected by. So think about a water balloon bouncing on the floor, or a football, or a solid golf ball, for example, like really like this sort of like dense ball like that. And again, all of this is applied to everything from full object to, it can be facial expressions. It can be both in 2D and 3D in the sense of how we manipulate stuff. And one really important thing with this to make it believable is keeping the volume consistent. So that's sort of like shape and volume to be consistent. Don't overdo it. In certain situations when you have to exaggerate, but that is, again, situation where exaggeration is necessary, we do try to still keep it, like in its limits. But most of the time, they are pretty much in their own shape and volume in majority of time. But there will be examples towards the end of these principles today of when exaggeration, and exaggeration is actually one of the principles in itself. But then again, we very carefully decide when we do such extensions kind of to this particular rule. So let's see how that looks. All right, so here is the bouncing ball. If you pay attention here on the corner, in the corner of the sheet, I honestly don't know how many really frames this one is, but here I think it was like 24 or something frames, which is absolutely insane amount of frames to do for example, game or app or website or whatever, because we need to have optimized, minimal viable kind of like animation, which can be ran without any performance issues. So imagine that if your just one bounce would take 24 frames, that would be insane. Like this is what you can do maybe in 4 frames or so. Just basically something that is, especially depending of what kind of behavior you want. But this is where we can also with the, you will see later with timing, with one of the principles, we can actually manipulate a lot of stuff and make it more believable even with less frames. But let's go with the basics. So actually this can keep going. So let's, oh no, it's not gonna, I'm sorry about this. Okay, so I'm gonna draw a bit to show around. So what we just saw is that, let's say we have a, sorry, I'm drawing with the mouse, so this is gonna be not so good, but let's go. So let's say the ball starts here, and the ball is in its, so we are gonna start from its static state. In this case, it's being coming from somewhere. So basically, even if it's thrown or whatever is happening, but that's the basic shape now that we are going to start from. So we are not going to say that it was thrown with a big speed, like through some cannon or something, and now that is also giving the shape change. No. Let's just keep it simple. we can even hold the ball like this and drop it, and let's see what happens with it forward. So once we have a ball, this is its origin, like this sort of state of what it is. So it's in its regular shape. And now when it's going to fall down, it's going to start falling down. And now what happens here? While it's falling, it's getting speed. When it gets speed, it's going to, of course, get more effect of what happens when it hits the bottom, which means that certain reshaping will take place, again, depending what kind of, but let's say this is a regular bouncing ball, so nothing like, so basically it would change its, so it's not a bowling ball, so it's not a, so it will get a bit squished. So but now for the sake of this, I will exaggerate it. So let's say it's going to get slightly more pancakey, and again, sorry about the volume because drawing with a mouse is not the best. So but it's going to get squished, like that's basically the thing, what's going to happen. Now when it starts going up, what happens is that because we are using Newtonian physics kind of like as a basis, so that means that it's not going to go as high as it used to, because if we think about that, this is now what height used to. So now because gravity is pulling it, it's going to be slightly below. And here will also be in its regular shape. I will explain why. And then after that, also, depending how, sorry about this, let's say it's going, this is kind of vertical thing, and this is vertical thing. So now you will also see that it's this, the destination is going to be shorter than the one that we had. And also here will be possibly even shortened down, and the squish might be less than it was here, because it's starting to slowly bounce until it goes into, you know, this sort of like basically small clips until it completely stops. But I will just focus on these here. So the thing here is that we have the keyframes. Basically, we know exactly where something is. So we know where it starts. We know where the first hit happens. Then it bounces off. It bounces back, and so forth and so forth. So now we're going to put filling ones. So or in betweens. So we have here that as it was going out, basically, again, exaggerating a bit just for the sake of you understanding how the shapes will be behaving. Now that it's getting speed, it's going to get stretched a bit until it hits down and squishes into kind of pancakey, and then it goes up. When it goes up, it's starting to get the speed, so also will be a bit stretched until it stops there. Now, timing-wise, to make it even more believable, and again, we are talking about regular bounce. We are not doing any special effects kind of thing, regular bounce. That means that as it's coming down, it's getting faster. That means it's going to stretch, hitting. It's gonna, there is this very big effect of, you know, physics, and that it's going to squish based on the force that it had. Going upwards, that now it gets the speed to go up, so it's going up. But then what happens is usually it gets this maximum velocity that the object is at, after which, the moment it reaches the maximum velocity, it stands there in air for a split second or whatever, not moving anywhere. And then it starts falling. So there is the really important part to have here in these situations in the air, moment of like slow down, like basically a pause to make it more believable. And then same thing goes here, that this is maybe not going to be that different compared to what it was here. But this is where it gets back to its original shape, and then and stays for a moment in the air, and then starts falling down. And that's how we, so again, even here, we have for this particular thing, like what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 kind of like spots, but instead of 24. And this is still too many if we will be using for games. So just to kind of like, because we won't be doing most likely, so basically what we would use is this one and reverse, because we won't be doing necessarily, depending what you need to, but in the action, because the looping action, we will most likely have these three. Now, if you want to make it more believable, so that's the thing, if we want more fidelity to the movement, then we are giving more frames in betweens, as many as you want. You can have even 50 frames here altogether if you really want to make it smooth, and fiddle with also all the stuff. So you start filling in, and more frames you have, it should make it more believable because you are making it smooth whole thing. So that's basically how any basis of animation works. Doesn't matter what you do, and that's why we start with squash and stretch, because that is how most of the objects we are also, again, translating to the brain how things would work. Does this make sense? Any questions on this? And I will now just click for a moment. I can actually remove all of this so we can watch this as well. And again, apologies for my horrible mouse artistic skills. There we go. And now let's watch. Oopsie. So pay now attention on this. Look how even far off compared to the like, until it stops. All right, if no comments and questions, let's move on to the next one. Next principle is anticipation. Now, this is really, really interesting one, because basically we are giving viewer more information of what is to come. What is the main animation that it's coming? So for example, bouncing ball. Okay, it bounces, but where that bounce comes from? So we are, by anticipation, we are giving introduction to the main movement, whatever that movement is. And more importantly, it's giving the movement more realistic. So, because especially this is not necessarily by the laws of physics of that world. We are talking more of what would be believable for the viewer. And this is where we are communicating to, like, what is the chain of actions that will be taking from one to what is to come. But mostly you can even later with the filler animations having this sort of like, or in betweens, even use some other animations, anticipation animation that would be merging in between. So you can cheat a lot of stuff there. And there are multiple levels of anticipation. Some are more complex sequences, some are simple ones. But the thing is, when we are designing movement, we have to keep in mind that we have to avoid competing actions, because it always has to be the main action that one needs to focus on. Even if you have multiple things happen, but the main action, what is it? And that means that all other actions should be following it. Like even if there is, let's say, even if it's a battle scene, battle is the main thing. Whatever happens outside should enhance that main movement and not compete with it. Because we want someone who is either watching a movie or playing a game, that movement is what they focus on. So this is where we are figuring out that we don't want to have this sort of situation in which possibly certain movements are competing. So now let's see how it looks like. Usually the animations, sorry, I'm clicking around, but here we go. So let's watch this format, especially the right one, because anticipation movements can be also done these micro ones, like the one now that we see on the left with the lady and her hair. But the main thing is that we, basically the one on the right with the character starting to throw a ball. So this movement, I will try to click it in the right time. Let's see. There. So basically this movement, if we look at the one on the right with the character and the ball, the character is going backwards, lifting the leg, preparing with the whole body for the throw. Throw is the main move. But we are preparing the character, because if otherwise character would be just static standing and suddenly it would do boof, that would be weird. Like that's the kind of like choppy, weird, like you could potentially do that for mechanical. Now that's another thing. When we are talking about organic and mechanical, usually mechanical movement is rhythmic, meaning that repeating. So we are usually defying something, and that's why kind of like, robot dance kind of stuff. So there is the reason for that is that we are making it clear to the brain that mechanical movement or any kind of artificial being and so on has this kind of pattern of movement, repeatable ones, which are on some sort of loop, and they are not as they can be smooth, but smooth in a way that they are not organic, oval or curvy movements, which usually we have in organic type of objects, meaning, animals, any kind of organic being, or matter. It can be a matter also, like when we talk also about the different kind of materials, which are, again, it can be liquid also, it can be solid, but there are ways how we basically tell a brain without telling more than just the way how the rhythm of that movement is being given. So in this case, anticipation is exactly this, where you are preparing for the main movement. And so now let's watch it again. So by you seeing that the character is lifting, like going back, you are already understanding that might be the thing that it's gonna, and this is something that happens subconsciously. Like this is not something you need to be fully aware of, but we are giving that to the user. It's really important to make it believable. And then with the smaller micro ones like this, where, her hair falls out, okay, so she's gonna lift it back because she's fixing her hair. So it can be micro ones, or it can be the full body movement as here. So this is how we make it more brain friendly to kind of like manipulate certain behaviors and information we are given. Any question on this one? Is this clear? I will also put now the attendance list. There we go. Alrighty, awesome. Let's move on. So now that we see, so we went through squash and stretch, and then we are having anticipation. Now, staging. So staging, staging is a tricky principle, because basically we are basically creating this stage, as it says, of what should happen and when. Basically, who and where and why is something happening that for the audience it's very clear. So this is where timing has extremely important part, especially for these different. So which are the acting parts, like which are the objects that we have, how they should behave, how they should interact possibly with each other, or is there something that is happening in the world itself that it's doing its own thing. So let's say you are in a forest. The forest has a little breeze, so there might be that there will be some stuff that are just moving idly like that in the back, while the main action is showing something else. And there might not be correlated in that sense, so there won't be, but it might be that you have, let's say, two samurais fighting in a forest, beautiful Japanese kind of like, environment. And now even if someone does some, whoosh move, suddenly even the background will kind of like something will have a bit more movement. So again, we can and we should also create these layers of interaction, but that's where we are. So otherwise, if there is no whoosh close to the, let's say, bushes, flower, grass, wherever these characters would be, we are staging, and meaning that there are certain type of until something happens. So basically how we treat timing is that we always try, and again, this is the basic rule, which of course we can break, well, at least to, tinker with it, for the sake of believability. So basically we are always trying to finish one movement before we start another one. So that's usually what we are trying. But again, as I said, it can be correlating. You will see very soon with some more complex principles that we are building upon. And then this is blocking this. Depends which school of animation you would ask, but could be taken as within the same, but I would still claim that blocking is more more kind of like prioritizing maybe in that area of staging, but I would still, they are obvious. All of these, by the way, are related. Like they all work as a whole, but we are, as I said, separating these in a way that is slightly easier to understand what gets into the movement design, whatever that movement or animation is. So for the sake of simplicity, I would say it's close by. But yeah. Um, and and then, yeah, really important to have pauses. Like that's the thing. Like as mentioned, the action means nothing without the sort of pauses that would enhance the action itself. And this is where the text, for example, on the screen. So when you have text, any kind of text, what you are showing, it can be just the end, you know, this sort of like, it can be anything, or featuring, or like it can be one word, or it can be small, or it can be full paragraph. Whatever text you are giving, the rule what we have is that if you as a creator can read 3 times that text on the screen. So for example, if we have just a screen saying the end, so if I say the end, the end, the end, that's how long. So 3 times read it out loud. That's how long the text for someone else should stay on the screen. This is the just common standard thing that we are having as one of those best practices. Of course, you can keep it longer and also cut it or do something else with it. But again, the best practice is that 3 times it takes you as a creator to read something out loud that's the amount of time it needs the information to stay for someone who'd never seen it again. So if you have a text coming, make sure that it's long enough that others can read it, especially if you're giving some, like really important information. Staging, of course, this is where the camera mode comes in, especially for, of course, movies and games, in the sense that we also have a control usually over camera that we can, like give a player a way to interact with and get the angles and so on, and that's part of the gameplay. So camera mode is super important when it comes to how we also allows one to interact with things, but also what we different kind of things what we highlight with the camera, basically distance from the object. So for example, this is now, I will be talking about the standards. Obviously, these are all rules that you can break, and we can see these examples of breakages everywhere. But usually the camera further away, like showing more what's happening, is something that, so basically further away camera usually focuses on the action. And that means that something is happening on the bigger picture that one wants to see. So for example, in the fighting scenes, usually the fight scene will be from the certain below that you see this kind of like who is fighting where, what's going on. And then it will go into the like zooming in into specific maybe movements, so what do you want to highlight? But then usually what we use very focused like zoom in kind of thing is usually on emotion. So usually you will have camera very close, meaning talking about the sort of the view very close to, for example, face, where we want to highlight what emotion, what is happening in, or what are the relation, or what is that sort. But we are going into this sort of more emotional information when we zoom in, while when we are in the distance, we focus on the action and on the bigger kind of picture of what is going on. And naturally, I'm sure that you know quite many examples, both in games and movies and everywhere else, where these are broken, of course. But these are the best practices that I want you to know after today, so that you know what you can break in your own projects. So basically, close view, expressions, long, like further away, action. That's the easiest way to kind of like differentiate these two. And of course, you can do anything in between. Now, the environment or the setting of what you are staging with. So main action should always be, we are trying not to center. I already said this even in the concept, like we are trying not to have center. So basically, let me draw again. Like if we have here the screen, and if we know that this is center, we are trying not to happen exactly in the center, but just slightly either here or basically here, so that it's can be centered, but at least to the kind of like within kind of like third of the screen from each other. So basically, we want to have, if we think that this would be kind of like in three parts here, or that it would be slightly away from the actual center. And the reason for that, why we do it, same like with the horizontal lines and so on. So we always try to have slightly angles there, because if we have parallel stuff, like let's say I have a tree here, and I have something happening here that I want, and it's also a tall thing, that our brain will find patterns and start being confused over things that when they're two parallel stuff. So we are sometimes, for the sake of believability of what is happening, we want to move that it's not parallel exactly next to each other in whichever way, because again, avoiding patterns, because our brains create patterns, but we want to break that because we want that someone focuses on the action and not on accidental pattern. Because again, brain, weird thing to kind of like how much we actually need to trick our brain to actually believe that something is realistic, which is counterintuitive when you think about it, but that's where psychology studies help us a lot with. So this is why we are always having this sort of third of the screen for each other, trying to kind of be in a kind of slightly off the center, but pretty centered. And then go over the top to make sure. So basically, you can totally go over the top. You can exaggerate things depending what you're doing and how you're doing and what you need. So to highlight again what we want, the main information that we want to give. And do not use objects that contradict that message. So basically, again, don't do something. So you sometimes need to remove something in order to not be a distraction for the main message that you're giving, or for main action that one needs to focus on, if that makes sense. So what we do with staging, we are completely in charge of what the user focuses on, in what time, in what sequence, in what order. So what they should focus first, second, third, where should go, how to do. And this is also what we use, guess what, in web design. When you have these cool animations, it's not there just to be cool. We also want to utilize stuff to actually highlight what we want user to focus on first, click on second, sign up to this, purchase this. You know, this is literally what we're also using in interaction design for literally services, and not mentioning for marketing and other stuff. And that's why it's really important when you're staging that there is no also competition between different objects, and that how you stay, like how the timing goes, is that what you focus first, what you focus further on, like priority, like basically hierarchy of this sort of like movements that would be there. So let's see what this means in practice. So let's focus on the one on the left, the one with the two basketball players. Let's look at it for a second. So now we have two characters going against each other, towards each other, but kind of like, so we see that there is this tension. And then when they meet up, there is this, that's when we start seeing even what their goal is, meaning that's when even the basket or the kind of like gets into even the stage. So we are not seeing even where one is going towards yet, but we are introducing even the main goal much later in this staging, like in this particular composition that you see now. So it's not by mistake, like it's carefully decided that we want to focus on them, there is this tension that one is headed, the one is being opponent and trying to stop them, and then as they complete their action, this is where the action, kind of the goal, is being shown also, like where it needs to go. And this is the basically what staging is all about. So we control every single way of, like, in every movement that, and you can see here what is the primary saying, like how the hierarchy here goes pretty well. But we are also staging, like in the second one, where we see this other character having a bit of a heart attack here, and immediately, so it doesn't have to be smooth. Like we can really exaggerate and do this sort of like what happens even in the one very short sequence. So again, it doesn't have to be a long storytelling thing. It can be a short thing that can have impactful information. Here, character saw something, scared off, and ran away. 3 things happened in 1 second, kind of stuff. So basically, and it's very, unlike the other one, this one is very choppy in a way that we cheat in that way, that we are taking, when you remove the time and certain frames, you're basically making it feel faster. That's what how we manipulate that. If we give more time, pauses in between, or some frames taking longer, just even static, we are building, like in the one on the left, the one with the, so there is a lot of like very fine tuning of the timing and how this to make it feel that it all blends together. While usually for speedy ones, we cut that. So we remove time, meaning the pauses, and we remove even some frames and so on. So you can do this in 3 frames, 4 frames tops. So that's how the staging kind of, so it doesn't have to be this sort of full picture. It can be just one thing that you are focusing on, but that information, then you don't need to have more information. Then we just know that this character saw something, scared, went. And that's all we need to give in that sequence, like in that particular stage, if that makes sense. So this is staging. And again, now we will see with some, so slowly we are going to turn into more complex principles, which also you will see now why these are the first ones. And then from here, things start to be even more colorful in its way. So let's see. Now we have straight ahead and pose to pose principle. Now, straight ahead, that means that we are drawing one pose and immediately starting to draw another one and another one and another one. So that means that we don't have these keyframes that we set and then do the filling in between, but instead we immediately, let's say frame 1, frame 2, so we just go one by one. Now, this is not necessarily good to do unless you are a really experienced animator, and even they don't necessarily do for specific kind of behaviors. Let's say human movements are not something that we usually do this way, because it's something that can really easily be, like, some small mistakes can happen way more easily. However, it's extremely good to be used for certain type of behaviors of the natural forces, natural environments, kind of like some sort of more fluid behavior, unexpected kind of behavior. So you will see very soon. And then pose to pose is pretty much what I even showed you with the bouncing ball. So basically we are setting up the main poses where something is, and then we are figuring out the rest. So basically we have keys, we have extremes, so extreme keys, keyframes, and then in between these breakdowns or even fillers to make it even more believable. And the thing with that, why pose to pose is excellent, especially, like, I mean, we use it mostly in every type of animation, but usually this is where you can just by tweaking around the distances between these frames or the timing between the frames and so on, you can do a lot of different effects and fixes way easier than it would be pose to pose, because then you have to redraw everything as it goes. So let me show you. There we go. So on the left, we have a fire, let's say, sprite sheet of fire animation. Now, if we would do fire animation in the way that would be pose to pose, so basically that would, that it would be, pose to pose, that it would be kind of like that it repeats. First of all, that might feel then more mechanical because we do know that, let's say, fire, air, water, and so on can behave in a certain ways that can have these glitches, which also give it more believability that something is not always just equally being like repeated all the time. So it's something is not right if it's constantly equally being. So that's why changing, for example, the shapes of certain sprites, like this sort of, and how you see that these sort of like details can be changing, like this gives it more believable feeling that it's not actually, even if it's a looping animation, but this variety of things is giving it a bit more believable behavior compared to having it, for example, as a in human, like trying to kind of like, for example, this running animation here. And also what you can do with the pose to pose, there's a lot of shortcuts, a lot of cheating in that way, but in a good way. So for example, you can notice here that this here is pretty much the same as this one here. The only difference is that which leg is front, which leg is back, which means that we can speed up our production a lot. And we can do this sort of like a lot of, especially in gaming, we are definitely going to, whenever we can cut something out to make it smaller, more optimized, and yet believable, because sometimes it's enough to do even minimal animation, but you put more VFX on it or something like that. And that can be like some trickery that you can do. But just as you can see, kind of like in pose to pose, we are very much more in control, and we can even make these shortcuts for us that we can just kind of like switch around and make it way easier just by changing, let's say like coloring or whatever, that it would be how it would be presented. While again, if this we would do with fire, it could not feel like there is a risk that it won't feel as good as organic as it would be if you just go straight ahead and kind of make it flow in whichever shapes the fire might be, because again, depends what kind of fire you're making. What is there wind, is there not wind, is it just cozy fire, or is it some burning bridges fire, like what is happening? So this is where you can really do a lot of amazing effects with very simple solutions. So that's why this principle 4 is also one of those absolutely everywhere being used, and for pretty much any kind of animation. And then now in combination with stretch and squish and all others that we already touched so far, this is when you are making it all even more believable. Now let's go to principle 5. So part of the animation, so follow through and overlapping action. Now follow through, usually you have part of the object that continues moving when the main object stops. So that's the follow through. Overlapping is when basically it's kind of like on top of the main object, and then it follows mostly the main object. And then we have dragging, which it's delaying certain type of or certain part of the character or item that they have or whatever it is, which delays from the part of the movement of the body. So this give usually, so follow through, overlapping, and drag. These are the 3 things that give, again, more believability to the object itself. And let me show you what that looks like. And then we can, of course, so basically, these you can even adjust post kind of processing things for, but so let's look at this. So we have some sort of character that might be sorcerers or whatever, like or a wizard, whatever, doing whatever movements. So we have a main movement, right? And the movement, the body does its movement. Now, overlapping is the one that we have that it's on top. So basically it has clothing and it's on top, and we have these sleeves that are now following the same movement of the object. Now, you will notice that the lower parts of these flimsy parts of the sleeves are having this follow through. So it follows through and even drags, like this could be done with, for example, capes, also hair, whatever else extra there would be that follows through, but also drags. It could be that it will be having maybe additional kind of movement as a final, as a finalizing movement for that. So basically, it kind of like gets back to its final position where it's supposed to be, but it has this follow through, but then also dragging back to its origin, sort of like what's supposed to be its natural state. So if we go back just one, so again, follow through, they continue moving from the body. Overlapping, it's basically offset from the main body and its parts. So it's there, but kind of like it follows through or whatever, overlaps with what main action is. And dragging is usually what we kind of like comes in the end to make it again even more believable. And this can be done with anything on top of any object, like literally anything. This is just one example and very simple one, but when you pay attention on characters, again, Batman, Superman, anyone with capes, anyone with hair, like if you play any of the, or watch even, from animes and everything, like it's just all over the place. And also you can exaggerate it to also give it more kind of, the force that this something has been done with. So the strength of it. So this is the kind of follow through and overlap. These are kind of as a one principle, as the fifth principle. And now we will see slow in and slow out, which is quite connected. Again, all of this is now super connected, and now it's kind of like going into this. So slow in and slow out, what it means. All movement always starts slow, builds up to the main action, whatever there is, and finishes also slowly. So why we have this? First of all, when we have, let's say your character, let's talk about the game. You have a character that it's idle, just, standing, being ready to do some action. And now it's supposed to start running. Well, first of all, from the static / idle animation just being like that, to start running, it needs to have at least this sort of like anticipation, but also a bit like at least first few steps towards becoming a run, and not even mentioning if you immediately start sprinting, for example, you need to have these that are building up upon. And usually that can be just few frames or something of some. So basically you are in like getting the warming up to the main action. So you can start with anticipation and then to this kind of first few minutes, and then it goes to the main action. And usually you slowly start, you have the main thing, and you also slowly stop. So let's say you are running and now you're supposed to stop, like stop. That means that you are not necessarily going to have immediate, stop and idle continues wherever you were. No, it's going to be most likely that there will be few steps of slowing down or kind of like, or maybe even kind of sliding on the depends how fast. If you have been sprinting, then of course it could be even this sort of more dramatic that you're kind of trying to stop, so you're kind of sliding on the ground until you stop. So that's the slowing down to again make it more believable that you just don't get into main action and get out of the main action like that. And this is mainly to achieve more lifelike motion, because none of us can immediately go into like that's the thing, you go from even physics wise, like you have these moments of build up, even if there is some big impact happens, still there is a build up to things that we are making it more believable. And this is where you really need to pay attention, of the change, how the changes of the movement are following the speed. Because that's the thing, it is just building up, and it can be very subtle, they're very small, but it still needs to be there. So basically, it builds up to the, again, main movement. And why it's also super cool to use this, especially in interaction design, interactive media, is that we can use these build up as little animations to combine them with each other. So basically, let's say that if you are from one place, you're supposed to start walking or running, or possibly even draw a sword, or hit someone, or whatever. So these, we can combine these in between and make it even more like modularly, especially for interactive animation, where you have characters going from one state to another. We can modularly create these, that these slow in and out ones, these feeling that they can actually work with each other. So when you have a character that goes from different actions, we can combine these in a right way, that the right trigger happens, so that it doesn't feel choppy, doesn't feel something is off, doesn't have some weird loop thing that shouldn't happen, and so forth. And this helps with, again, fixing this kind of choppy animations, especially in transitions, for example. That's very common. And how we usually can do that, especially with the trickery, kind of how we can trick it also, if not having kind of this, you can also just simply use the sprites you have, but change the space, meaning the duration of certain movements there, or the sprite, how long something is being in action of the frames. So this is one way you can kind of cheaply change that, so without having possibly full new animation to put in between, but you can manipulate the sprites you have and try to do that. That's one kind of cheap trick, especially works well in let's say pixel animation. That can work really well in pixel animation. So you don't have to, so it feels more organic, but so it doesn't feel as choppy, but it has a more like this. So you can that's one way. So let's see how that looks like. So we have this character that is seeing something, slowly getting up. We are having also anticipation here before jumping and so on. But even preparations, each of those, these are also a bit more exaggerated of slow in kind of thing, because each of these getting up and so on, these are all being part of this building upon the main action, which is jump. Jump is the main action. So basically, again, this is exceptionally have multiple steps to it. But I hope this explains kind of like how slow we can go, kind of even multiple to build up. Because now from here, even that this character would get into the sitting position, maybe from sitting position would not go into the jump, but might go into sprint, might go into something else. And that's what we could kind of work with, that we can combine, or other way around. If we reverse it, maybe character from sitting would go back to lay down. And again, we can reuse and like save our time with loads of these frames, how we use and the timing and so forth, and which direction one goes and so forth. So even that it might seem complicated and overwhelming, animation overall, there are various ways that we, especially in digital animation, I mean, we cheat a lot. And quite often it comes with the feel. Does it feel good? Even if you think that, oh, I did everything by the book with the timing and so on, and then you play it and it's like something is missing. And that could be just slight tweaks of the timing, for example, or placement of the certain frames. And when it feels kind of, yeah, this now feels more like, nobody can tell you why. Kind of like, it just like, it comes from that sort of inner feeling that it feels organic, it feels good, it feels believable. So trust your eyes. That's the thing. Like that's, or if not your eyes, if you see this, like if you're closely working with something and you don't see really anymore the difference, that's why fresh pair of eyes. Ask someone, colleague, someone else to actually give you more input or feedback on something. So yeah. Now, any thoughts or questions on the Anything so far? At least Uno is unmuted, so just to double check if there is any question there. And if not, okay, we can then move on. So we are pretty much on the half of these, so let's move on. Now, this is fun one. Okay, so okay, no problem. No problem. I just thought that if there is something, because usually when unmute comes, no problem. Okay, so arcs. Arcs are our best friends. First of all, everything in nature, everything we know of moves in a spherical way, not circular, spherical. And that works for our advantage. Now, this gives character and objects more, again, realistic movement. Something is being this sort of like following certain type of sphere. Can be added to the figures themselves, like the way how the bodies move can be moved into the whole, like you can use arcs anywhere. And very commonly what we use them a lot is in effects, special effects. So basically, when we want something to highlight, so we can have really choppy, really, that's what I told you about. We can fake with the choppier things inside, so it's more optimized in the main action. But if we add stuff happening around in certain arcs and so on, we highlight the power of that movement and the effect it might have, but also give it more believability with this kind of spherical effect it might be around. And of course, this could be also used on the additional objects. Let's say I mentioned samurais. Maybe samurai had like this, also basically how using the sword or stick or whatever weapon or whatever, or just own martial arts stuff. Like we can also use these on the separate objects within the main object that it's interacting with. So let's see how that looks. And you might notice here, we'll be watching these pretty like several loops. So I decided to use this kind of anime exaggeration. So, and ignore the chicken at the end. It's amazing. But pay attention on this dude, and just generally even how the hair here is also part of this spherical movement enhancement. And also all the main animation, main object movement are very choppy. Like basically 3 to 5 frames, nothing special. But then the emphasis in on these effects, like look at this stick, for example. There is this also these additional elements on it that it enhances the speed by movement, because like we are tricking it out, and all this fire effect, like this is all this spherical arc based movement which pushes that sort of like the overall effect of what we want someone to see. So we are tricking the brain to think, oh, this is so powerful. But if we would remove any of these additional spherical kind of like things, it would be really not so impressive animation. And anime is full of those. So basically, and also many other. And of course, in games, this is what we do. Everything happens super fast in the games. So, and the player usually focuses on the action that they are at hand. So they are solving the challenge at hand. It can be that, they're fighting the monster. They're focusing on doing the right things. Of course, the visually we are explaining that are you succeeding in it or not, or what you need to do. But also it needs to feel empowering. It has to, so we might be removing some frames somewhere, but adding more effects on top that highlights that movement. So we are tricking it through it to be this sort of the movement here, because your brain will fill in the rest. And that's a beautiful thing. We're so good. I mentioned patterns. If we give enough information for patterns, our brain will fill in the rest and feel that it's realistic. So use that. Use the user's brain to fill in the frames you have no optimizing power for. As simple as that. So this is how so arcs are your best friends for majority of animations, and this is something we will see also later. So next time you are looking at, again, pay attention, just pay a slight attention. Or if you're playing a game, move your character around, see what they do, see what they just like explore the sort of from idle to what, like just see that transitioning, how it happens, and what the developers did to make it work, both in 2D, 3D, like whatever you play, mobile also, whatever you play. But give it a look, because it's really fascinating to see how, like, for us who are in the industry, I can tell you it's our professional issue that when you can't always just sit and enjoy something. You will start noticing some trickery that devs did. Oh, look what they did there. Oh my God, we could try this and that. Like, because you know how complex something can be. And then when you see that someone did something and solved something, but just observing that they solved something that might have been a headache, it's something that unfortunately becomes part of being. But I always try to at least enjoy the game for itself, and not overanalyze. But both, even if you don't like something or you super like something, you want to know how is it made, and how it is made, and then it comes into that witch's circle. But just heads up that if this becomes your thing of interest, you will be noticing all sorts of stuff. But anyway, these are the arcs. So that's what we are kind of like, and now this is exaggeration, what I'm showing here, just to kind of like understand in a bigger, but everything. So remember, everything in that nature and natural effects, natural things, like it goes in spherical way. Mechanical, again, if you want to highlight that something is mechanical, then you can make this rhythmic, repeating, and possibly even more rigid movement kind of stuff. Like think about robot dance compared to the dance, so, or whatever else happens in your product. So yeah, these are the acts. Now let's go to secondary action. Now this is super interesting because this is very commonly confused with some other principles. For example, overlapping action, the one that we had with um, the sleeves. So we have a movement or a gesture, but anyway, it's a separate thing that supports the main action. So now you can understand why this could be easily mistaken for anticipation, for overlapping, for many other stuff. But basically, this is adding more dimension to the object. So we are giving it more characteristic, like really not just believability, we're giving it more unique voice. Now, let's see what that looks like. I'm sure that you're aware of this character. If not, it's Robin Hood, Disney old classic. Now, can someone tell me? Sorry, I'm just going to move because I realized that I don't see. Can someone tell? And again, don't worry, like this sort of right or wrong, or that doesn't matter. Just what is, in your opinion, is the primary, what is the main action here? What is the main action? Yes, absolutely, walking. The dude is walking, he's merry away, all good. Now, what is the secondary action? We have the tail moving, okay. Any other thoughts? What is the secondary action? Head nodding, okay. Robin looking happy, arm swinging, head nodding, all right. Bouncing, yes, that's the part of the whole squish and squash. Like this is where you are highlighting this whole looking to the side. So pretty good observations, because actually each what you pointed out are part of different principles, and now we are going to point them out. So let's go into, so main walking, we know that. So great job, like walking, yes, main information being given. Now, the secondary action, that it's supporting the main action. What is supporting walking? The walking, to be believable as a main action, it's the arm swinging. Because when we walk also, think about it, when we walk, our arms also follow our walking. That's how we balance our body. So the secondary here is the arms. And then we have follow through and generally overlapping ones. Follow through is with the tail. It follows the bounce. It follows what's happening there. Could be even a bit of dragging at the end, especially as it's going to end the animation. Now this is looping, so it doesn't matter. And same thing goes with the feather. This feather bouncing is also following now the behavior of the head, which is also this sort of like overlapping activity. So we have the head that it's following the bounce of the walk and of the arms. So do you see now how complex, like how layering goes? But still, the most important thing is that you understood the walking as the main thing, which is exactly where the hands helped a lot. Not necessarily, because think about it, if he wouldn't have hands just being behind, but doing this with the head, you would think that he's insane. Now you know that he is jolly, walking his merry way. So this kind of layering and having this primary, secondary, and other actions, and it can be even more actions that would be following through the whole experience, is something that enhances. So secondary, remember that secondary enhances the main. In this case, his arms are giving you exactly more information about his walking, which is the main one. So do you understand now the difference with, in that sense, that what is secondary compared to at least overlapping, which is a hat, pretty much. And then, of course, we have the tail and so on. That all follows. Now, how you want to call, again, I just want you to understand these. Like, it doesn't matter, do you put the right kind of like, is it overlapping? Is it follow through? As long as you understand that it's not part of these main and secondary, so but it's happening to enhance the thing, that's really all that matters at this point. So as I said, more you get into animation, if this is something that you want, then of course you're going to get way more, like you will train your eye to really see the slight differences between them. But for us here in this course, this time, as long as you understand main, what means to be secondary, that basically supports the main, and everything else follows, that's a happy place to be. Like that's a win situation that you learned from this today's lesson. So is this clear, or does anyone have question about it? Is this like, does the logic click? What is the secondary action? All right. So few more to go. I mentioned timing. So time, incredibly important for the movement, obviously. Like everything from not just like, look at me, I'm super excited today, even at here with colleagues, I got that I'm super expressive. So that's the thing, the timing of even like facial things. It's not just about time, and like it can be minimal things that you are combining, like combining the movement, also facial things like exaggeration, everything else. So basically time is absolutely giving a more personality to the message you're giving through the movement. So basically frames. So first of all, how many frames you have? What is the distance between them? That's kind of the timing in a way. And also where you want to maybe completely cut something off and so on. And many drawings together, so many frames together in equal distances will give you smooth, slow and steady, repeatable animation. That's basically what it is. So when you think about something doing in a specific rhythm, so it follows very specific thing. But then if you have a fewer frames in more distance, it can be affecting the speed. Now, if you have more distance in between, it can be slower. It can have faster stuff in, like if you want to, things happen just no times in between. So basically, depending how you, even with the existing frames, you just change the placement, like this or the space in between, basically that can be enough to, by combining some to be closer, some further away, you can give this timing a bit like more character, more charisma to the objects that you work with. So now let's see how it works. So we have Shere Khan on the left, and we have some, again, jolly lady going nuts in a like with the dancing. So pay attention on Shere Khan. Again, Disney is the place where you can learn the mastery of all of this, and pay attention how this pausing, like he says something, pauses, and there is this faster thing that changes the model as he's laughing to the other side. So there's this faster transition there, and still there would be another place where kind of pause happens. So this is also part of staging, but so now you will see that everything is very connected in that way, that when we start putting things into full experience, I hope now it's getting more clear of what each of these principles help you build. Because at the end, again, as long as you have good results at the end, you don't have to necessarily explain what you did in staging, what you did in this space, what you did, because it will be all together as a unique, good experience for the viewer. But here, for the timing, they're sort of figuring out what is the time, and dancing animations, any kind of dancing animation, that is particularly important to follow then the existing rhythm of whatever sounds, music, whatever you have that now animation should follow. So basically, in games, in movies, in animated kind of like that. So we are having, if you have a soundtrack or something, or there is a dancing scene, and so everything has to follow then specific, let's say, Disney musical stuff. Like every Disney movie is a musical in its moment. So basically, whenever these kind of songs come, everything follows the songs. So it's not just about it, like it also follows that, and it has to click together. So that's where we usually then manipulate timing in animation based on the timing of the track that we have to follow. So sometimes you have no choice. So you have to make it work with the track that it does, and then you are figuring it out. But that's timing. You are basically figuring out where and how frames would be going and in which way. And then a few more. I mentioned exaggeration. Basically, I gave you a lot of exaggeration examples in the examples, but this is where we really break realism. This is where you also want to possibly distort even shape and so, but not too much. Again, it still has to be recognizable as a thing, unless this is something that it's the point that you want to distort if some big effect happens. So we are exaggerating. Now, this is very common in comics, like or cartoons and so on. We're really kind of exaggerating there. And in games, yeah, to the degree, depending what art direction you have. But let me just show you. So here on the left, we have Spider-Man jumping up. Now, this is very exaggerated. First of all, this camera angle and the camera like objective. So basically how it's stretched out, this sort of like wide lens kind of thing, that it's giving more oval thing even of the so basically manipulating the scene where in certain moments you can feel that his arms are kind of extra stretching, even that they're supposed to be the regular, let's say, still human anatomy, but they feel certain parts in his movement are feeling that are slightly more kind of something superpowery compared to regular human that would be, because it's of course more cool that if his arms look longer, even if they're not, and we exaggerate that. And then here we have Cuphead game, which is, I mean, poor people behind what they did. Like they really went all the way with exaggeration and things, especially the animators even did everything handmade. So they wanted so many times during the development to switch to digital, but then they still animated everything by hand. So big kudos to that. But can someone tell me on the one on the right, because now when we watch Cuphead one, you will notice that this is the part where lots of different actions are taking place at the same time, right? So we have the character on the right on the boat, we have the shark, we have this barrel wanting to smack you, We have lots of stuff happening. So can someone tell me, for the Cuphead character, what is the main threat? Who is the main objective that needs to be defeated? What do you think? So we have the boat guy. Also boat guy. Yes, it is boat guy. But very commonly it can, like, that's the thing, like, even if, so that you have no idea how hard this is to time in exact like this, or to really clearly on this, you have a scene that everything wants to attack you, everything wants to kill you, and you still have to be very clear what is your main target, who you need to avoid, or who you need to kill, maybe, if depends on the game now, if you need to defeat also the shark or not, or do you need to just avoid whilst just defeating the main dude. So that timing, to put it that it's all clear, so that it's very clear, there is no competing actions, it's so hard. And that's why I used Cuphead here as one of those examples that did the masterful job. If you haven't played the game, watch playthroughs. Please pay attention if this is something that interests you. Pay attention how they were preparing this sort of primary, secondary, and other, I mean, like how they stage stuff, that it's very clear what you need to do, how you need to do, and what you need to avoid, like this sort of. So it's not actually competing at all, but it's very clear with nuances. Like, it's so hard. That is so hard to do. And so, yeah, amazing. There is also a comment that the red flashing is the reason I know it's both guys. Is there any ways they use animation to make that clear? Um, uh, Yes, I mean, basically, now that Cuphead has been hitting it, then of course it gets red. But the thing is that um, when you arrive to the area, you will first get introduced to the main guy as a main thing, and then it's gonna start, and then suddenly it's gonna come up the shark, and then suddenly it's gonna come up. Actually, I don't remember now the actual. It was many years since I actually played the game, but let's say educated now guess would be that you would be staging exactly what you are introducing, and then it could be that in a certain battles, I'm talking just generally now, that you would, so you have a main character, and then after certain main that you need to defeat, and then after a certain time you're introducing, maybe you got half points off, and then comes harder by he getting a companion, someone to actually just distract you, like this shark or something like that. And then at the very end, maybe there might be another one like this barrel to come. So the difficulty raises also by giving this, and it's very clear then still who you avoid, how you are. So um, you're basically introducing one thing at the time. That's very common way of doing. But depends what you want them to see. That's where your staging thing is. Maybe you want everything to go at once and just like figure it out. And then that's when you especially want to make some more frustrating games. I think also good one is to check about the Super Meat Boy, for example, and stuff like that, and different kind of this sort of platformers and puzzle games can have quite interesting this sort of like things to really clear what your actual task is and what parts of the puzzles you don't deal with, for example, or you don't do it yet, and stuff like. So that there are ways, like, look into those if this is something that interests you, of course. But it can be genre specific. Like, for example, in Cuphead, this was whole point that it would be, I guess, 20s, 30s, 1920s, sorry, like these are very old kind of like cartoons. Because, for example, Mickey from before, from 1800s already, still late 1800s, like, and other animations there would be kind of like having these very exaggerated overlap and looping things. So basically one can learn also there, because lots of stuff is happening. So if you watch very old cartoons, like even Technicolor ones, so that's slightly later, and then Disney, of course. But yeah, 1920s already are very advanced in animation compared to previously. And yeah, some of these kind of would be, if this is something that's but yeah, different ways, but these are some ways that you can kind of just think about it, just mindset, nothing more. Cool, we have more. Solid drawing. Now, I already mentioned about the Disney mouse three circle thing when we talked about shapes and stuff, that like it's always recognizable from wherever. So this is something that how we usually do animation, that when we are preparing each frame, when we are figuring out each stuff, then we are basically figuring out how that character, object, whatever it is recognizable to be that from different angles, especially if we are dealing with different angles. And this is where, especially in the 3D space, like form, weight, balance, this is where we want to make sure that it's part of that space, that it's not just, that doesn't feel like outsider. And also if you have any kind of shadows, that the right shadow is being there following it, that it doesn't feel like it's off the hook, because all of this has to follow the movement. And basically solid drawing, what it really refers to is, can you realize, can you really, like, can you recognize from any angle the main thing that it's happening? And this is especially when you want to avoid parallel lines or any kind of pattern, accidental pattern creation. So this is where these curved lines will give you more kind of this sort of natural feel. You want to also avoid twinning, like having like multiple things or similar things repeating on the screen. You also want to slightly even adjust that maybe legs and arms are not exactly symmetrical. You will see soon what that means. Just very slight. We are talking about very small adjustments, because you want to make clear that this is what you are representing, doesn't accidentally get and this is where planes, like the distance, especially in 2D, you have to make sure also that everything feels like a depth and not being slapped on each other. So let me show you. So Tinkerbell doing a very questionable dance moves, but respect. So no matter what, in which angle, in which pose, in which movement Tinkerbell is here, we can always recognize Tinkerbell as her, because she has very specific bun and the what are those? The fringe. We have these cutout the skirt parts, which are also like very like triangularly, very. So even if we think of the silhouette, it's very clear silhouette. And even these pompons that she has on her little shoes, like that is a really big, again. So no matter from which angle we would see her, even as a silhouette, if you just kind of like look as a through your eyes, kind of like through the half closed eyes, the kind of like what would that be? You will still recognize a character. And this is what we usually do first. So solid drawing means that we first do very rough sketches of the poses and how we need to adjust maybe the position of that bun, or how we move the arms to be, instead of like slightly somehow else, that it doesn't create pattern, that it doesn't overlap, that it doesn't maybe. So that's the solid drawing. We are making sure that every pose, it's very solid drawing. And then from there we go into details. So basically recognizable, especially this is for games extremely important, because your player has to understand exactly where, what, and not to get confused through some movement or something is like, where's my character? Let's say you play Among Us, you play whatever else, you play something with multiple that could be similar characters around. Which one is mine really? Even if you are all together and in a big bunch. So very clearly understanding who is who. And then the final one, appeal. So basically, this is where we are giving extra charisma to the character. So this is where we can give extra fluff and glitter to it. So this is where we want to focus on specific characteristics that make a character unique. And this is where you can slightly exaggerate, especially to highlight, again, Tinkerbell's bun, pompons, like stuff like that, very specifically that we know it's her. no matter what. This is where the shapes, so you can add different shapes and volume for each character depending on what you want to do. You want to also maybe slightly adjust, so again, not to be fully symmetrical, so but slightly adjust proportions so that all of these will be recognizable in comparison to other objects and other characters. And this is where we are giving individuality to the objects or characters. So let me show you. So here on the right, Mega Man, very old one. But also it can be any kind of characters that, again, can be this sort of side-scrolling thing. It can be, but we are making, and here we have this sort of solid drawing example of Mega Man, this sort of like how the movement goes. That basically you are making sure that like this sort of oversized head and oversized this kind of parts of the arms and stuff like it's all part of the shape design that we are giving it more unique expression, like a unique definition of who Mega Man is, for example. So you can totally do that. Like that's the thing you can. Even in realistic, you're doing super realistic stuff. Give it a bit of something. It can be something on the clothes. It can be something with the hair. It can play with the shapes of within which area something is taking place. For example, okay, if you would make me realistic character, like literally make a model, scan me, I will go, T-pose, scan me, put me in your game. Even if you scan my hair, if my hair wouldn't be fluffy and all over the place, it wouldn't be realistic. You won't really match my chaos, walking chaos, if there wouldn't be this everywhere, mostly in my face and crawling up the walls behind me. But so basically, my hair would be within certain shape, behaving in the way it would behave if you would make me a character. And then otherwise, if you just put that my hair is nicely behaving, totally following through my movement, like that would be breaking the character, because like I would like to actually that would be a dream that my hair would listen. So but and you can exaggerate that. Even if you're doing realistic, you can still exaggerate it in a specific places that you know. For example, Horizon Zero Dawn, like Aloy also with she has a very specific hairdo that is very recognizable as a shape. So it's realistic, but these kind of things that they did for her braids and stuff, and the way how things move, it's very Aloy. Nobody else. Others have their hairdos, but that's the thing. You can exaggerate in a specific places and yet feel realistic. So that's what we do. So it's not just for symbolic representation like these, like any of these characters or any of these and so on. So basically it can be more realistic, but then you pick what you go slightly extra mile to really give it extra charisma. So this is what we are giving. We're giving this unique charisma to whatever object or character, or it can be environment, like how it behaves. And also same thing to 3D. So I told you that pay attention on not things being symmetrical. Now, usually what we do when we deal with the children, and again, I don't have answer to this. Don't ask me. I have zero answer, but I can tell you when we are animating children or some younger characters, what we usually do, and I will play now this, feet. You see how her feet, this is 11 from Stranger Things, are slightly inwards. So it's kind of slightly inwards overlapping. And there is some reason that we as humans recognize child walking and running with just a very slight iteration inwards. I have no answer to that. Why? But it works. And it's actually very common. And yeah, it doesn't mean that you have to. You can also have parallel going. It's not like, that's not a rule. But if you pay attention of what different developers have been, or just generally creatives have been doing, it's fascinating to see these sorts. And actually, for some reason, our brain will say, yeah, maybe it's still developing, it's still learning how to run or walk. I don't know, like, but it's something that it's interesting to see how different characters can be represented through this sort of change of just slight adjustments to the movement and so forth. And yeah, those are the 12 principles of animation that I wanted to go through. Oh, and I'm exactly on time. Oh, look at this. Look at this. This is impressive. So, so we are exactly on time, as I don't want to take more, especially in the online setting. Do we have any questions or comments on this? Does this make sense? I hope at least that after today, it's a bit more understanding that how much stuff goes into the movement. So just to be aware of, like, not saying that you need to do this, but when you are talking to someone, talking to an animator, understand, like, now you have at least absolutely basics of the, like, this is what we as animators also use. Like, this is the, then we adjust things as we need, depending what we're doing, but we follow these. So it's not that complex, as you can see. It's very, actually quite logical. And then, of course, when you need to adjust something, you adjust it mostly even by the feel, or it can be technical reasons. Something cannot run on, let's say, VR that you wanted it to run. Well, adjust it. That's it. And then we do the best we can with what we can. But we follow these mostly. And that's across, again, any kind of animation. So basically, even when you're creating VFX and stuff like that, and any other, you know, side effects around in general, or even like this, or even After Effects would come maybe music, then musician can understand how maybe some layering of different effects would come and so on. So this all comes together in its kind of complex way, but at the same time, if you deal with it one day at a time, one thing at a time, it is more manageable. So I hope now the animation is, yeah. So this Thursday, yes, let's confirm that. This Thursday, there's no lecture. You have dedicated time to do your assignment. Now, if you already did your assignment with your group, you're free. So we have dedicated time for, so if you haven't, at least by the time that the lecture should be done, you should be done with your assignment, because you should submit it by 8 p.m. on Thursday. So through Moodle or by email, whichever. Again, if Moodle is being giving you some difficulties technically, then let me know, or just send me. So one person per group sends that, either submits to the Moodle or by email. Again, you have my email. So that is Thursday. So we have no lecture at all. It's dedicated to you to do your assignments. And then we meet in the basic, our regular back in Agora and Zoom, of course, regular setting on upcoming Tuesday. So back to normal. Apologies for this. It has been quite interesting schedule and twitching, to say the least, this past 2 weeks, but almost there. So things are good. And I hope that this also online is also more accessible, at least in this extra parts of it, because I didn't want to make you actually work more just because of my stupid schedule. So this was quite a, I think, good setting. So yeah, no Thursday stuff. You'd work on your assignment. That's it. So I give you full lesson to work on that, and then we recoup back on Tuesday. Any other questions or so? I will once more post the just to make sure, for those if they joined later, here is the link to sign up. And yes, the deadline for the assignment is to deliver it on this Thursday. That's why you are having lesson to work on it. So if you didn't make, so the point is that I understand that finding time to fit everyone's schedule is absolutely insane in this economy. especially before Christmas. So I want you to at least, that's why we are sacrificing one lesson, that you work on this, on your assignment, that basically no excuse that you can't meet at least to that dedicated time that you have now, and then deliver it, and then we're done. And then we can later on do the presentation, so we don't have to, because some of you will be having some other appointments and double also issues with schedules. So that's why I want now to focus still mainly on the lessons, because there are a few really important lessons, like technical art and VFX and stuff. And that we will do, I think, next week, if I'm not mistaken. And then after that, everything else, all is this, of course, being recorded. So therefore you can check it on in your own terms if you can't attend. But at least assignment is done. And then you don't have to worry about it. And then at least one person from your team will be presenting it later in December when we get there. So now you should deliver it. Yes. And then it's done. It's said in the assignment. Any other questions? Assignment you can find in Moodle. It's literally open. Can you see the assignment in Moodle? Also others, please confirm. Do you see it in Moodle? It's under previous lessons assignment. That's when I gave it, and that has been opened there as an assignment. Yes, all right. So others see. So go to Moodle. Previous lesson was what date it is? This is Tuesday. So that was it 17? What was it? So anyway, previous lessons, Moodle thing, there is assignment, and that's where you should submit it. So yeah. And thank you for the thing, because yeah, I'm a little bit limited here with this laptop. So thank you. And the groups you can see in the attendee list. I will share it once again. You see the groups. There have been also changes of some going solo and stuff. So if you want to join any group, please do that and be in touch. I can also leave this open call if you want to, like this, but you can, or you can also work solo, but groups are there. That's why I left them also for today's session, to see if someone wants still to shift around, because I have no preferences between you guys. And again, one can also do solo if you decide. It's better to do it in a group because we want that to be part of experience. But yeah. Any other questions? I hope things have been cleared. And if not, send me an email or whatever, kind of like, so I'll also do my best to answer as clear as possible. But yeah, if nothing else, you can also always do solo in case that some, you know, as you see, the assignment is not that hard. It should be fun actually to do it. So don't stress about it. All right. Are we good for today? How do we feel? Any other questions or? Well, that's up to you. How long do you need? Someone would need 20 minutes. Someone would need 3 days. I don't know how long it would take you, but at least I can guarantee you can do it within the class time. Definitely should be. So yeah, if you use the class hours that we have on Thursday, then do it in those hours. So nobody's clicking your hours. Up to you how long you need as a team. But yeah. Good. Alrighty. I'll let you go. Thank you so much for the day. And I'll be uploading the video shortly after this because it takes conversion and whatnot. And then, yeah, we see on next week's Tuesday. Have amazing assignment time, amazing group work. I believe in you. Can't wait to see what you come up with. And yeah, have also amazing weekend, because holy cow, we need some rest. At least I know I will be spending extra time playing games, maybe to recover from a few weeks of twitching. But yes, thank you. See you next week. Bye-bye.